Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming along to the workshop this morning. We're going to be looking today in Quirkos more specifically about exploring the data we've already coded. Normally these sessions start with a kind of overview of the basics, so creating themes, creating bubbles, and then dragging and dropping text onto them, the basics of kind of setting up and running your project. But today we're going to go and assume that you've done some of the coding already. You've done most of your analysis, and you're at a stage where you want to start exploring the data and see what kind of patterns in there. Now, Quirkos has got lots of tools to help you at that stage to visualize and kind of drill down into your data. So we're going to look at some of those today, and also look at some of the export options, which allow you to do a lot more complex analysis with the data if you need to, and also to share with other people who might not have Quirkos themselves. So what I've got here to start with is the example project that we have on our website. I'll just bring that up here. So if you go to this link here, you'll find that we've got this example project about the Scottish referendum for independence. This is a real research study that we did a couple of years ago, and we have permission from everyone we interviewed to put their transcripts up online and use them as examples in these workshops. So we use these for training materials when we run training sessions. But it's quite a nice kind of typical qualitative project. There's about 12 hour-long semi-structured interviews. They've been fully transcribed. And then we've gone through and coded them, seeing what people are saying about politics and their opinions on how the campaigning was run in that referendum for independence a couple of years ago now. So this is a fairly good kind of place to start. In this project, and you can download this already coded, the coding's been done. You can see we've got lots of different codes going on here, lots of concurrent coding. And you'll see in general, yeah, most of these codes have been quite completely, these sources have been fairly completely coded. So now we've got this coded data, what next? What do we want to see? How can we explore the connections and see what's going on in there? Well, one of the most useful things is the source properties. So when we brought these sources into the project, we described them in different ways. So we've got recorded the gender of the respondent, their occupation, and how they voted in the referendum, if they voted yes for independence or no. And one of the first things that we can do is subset analysis. So using the query view here, we click on that button, we can actually run queries just from specific groups of people in the project. So you'll see here, if we choose property, these are the source properties. We've got these options of gender, occupation, and voted. So let's choose voted, how people chose to vote yes. And so now we've got the responses that we've coded in the project from all of the sources where people voted yes, so they voted for independence. So, for example, let's see what they're saying about independence here. Then clicking on any of these bubbles here, it gives us a list of how many quotes there are for this group. So group of people who voted yes. And then on the right, we've got the actual text which those quotes come from. So we can tell already that this is someone who supports independence. I mean, I've always been SNP inclined because I've always felt that Scotland should be an independent country. That's Simon. Let's see what if we've got something from someone else here. Mark says, the idea isn't so crazy anymore, the idea about independence. Becoming a lot more credible to a lot more people now. So these are the things that people who supported independence are saying. But in Quirkos, we can also do a side-by-side comparison. There's a button here on the left for compare that launches the comparison query mode. And now we've got a side-by-side split. And we can look at two different segments of the population at once. So if we now choose voted no on the right, now we've got a side-by-side comparison. So if we now look to see on the left, this is still showing people who voted yes, and on the right, people who voted no. So yeah, so you can see exactly the differences here. So this person who voted no said, I always felt we were better as part of a bigger country. So that's their reason for voting for independence. What I'll do here is see if there's any difference in kind of how these are coded. So what's kind of interesting is they're actually very similar. So the people people who voted yes and no both have similar numbers of negative things to say and positive things to say. The people who voted yes seem to be talking about general politics a lot more. So that's something interesting that we can drill down into. And if we do find something interesting here in our subset analysis, we can create a report of it. So if I want a report which just has the responses from the people who voted yes, I can click on this report left query button and then generate a report which will show that information. And that will just have the responses from people who voted yes. But we can also make the query a lot more specific than that. So I'm going to turn off for now the comparison view, go back to the single view with the button on the left. And I'm going to choose here. So we've got voted equals yes, but I want to see just the women who voted yes. So I can keep adding with this blue plus button here extra lines to the query, and I can remove them if I like. So these are different criteria that the sources need to belong to appear in our search. So we want to see results for people who voted yes and where their gender was female. So if I run that query now, that'll update, and we see something interesting right away. And this is something that was noted in the feedback from the election, is that there are very few women who voted for independence. If we run it for men, we can see that there are plenty of results here. In fact, so that's telling us actually that all the people in our survey, at least, who voted yes were male. So there's something straight away that we've discovered about the data set, and we can look into a little more if we like. You've got other options here as well, so you don't have to just look through the search properties. If you're working as part of a team, you can look for work done by particular authors, so what they coded or what themes they created. You can also do dates as well. So if you want to look at work that was done on a particular month or during a particular day, you can do that here. You can also look for the quirk levels. So these are ways to group quirks together, and also the source title. So if you want to just see the results from one person, that allows you to do that here. So for example, if I did just want to see the results for, we choose source title, and then where's Simon, because that was quite interesting. So let's compare Simon and Mark. This allows us to actually kind of do a head-to-head with our respondents and see how differently they're coded. So again, there's not a lot of difference between them. They're both talking about similar things quite a lot, although it's interesting here. So you can see that Simon is mentioning independence a lot more than Mark was. So Mark may have been more generally interested in other issues, in other strategy. So that's an interesting thing to look for itself. Remember, you're doing qualitative analysis here, so don't rely entirely on these numbers. Just because this person has been coded more saying about independence, we can't really draw any comparisons or significant conclusions from that until we've actually looked back at the data and seen what they've said, the actual context of the qualitative data. So that's why there's this ability here to keep going back and looking at the data itself. Now, if you found something here that's interesting, so maybe I really want to read all of Simon's comments about independence, these buttons here allow you to copy all of the quotes here. So if I select them all with that button there, or I can choose specific ones here by turning them off and on there, and then click on the copy button here. Now this has been copied to the clipboard, and if we start Word or something like that, we can paste here the different quotes, and it will tell you also what source it comes from. So that's quite a useful way to get your data into a report you might be writing up when you want some quotes. Remember, you can copy those quotes one by one. And you can do that from any of the different views in Quirkos as well. So for example, if we go into the referendum bubble here, so this is the hierarchy view. This is everything people said about referendum and the other subcategories that we have here. You've got all these options here to select and copy the quote. So if I just want that quote there, start Word up again. So I can just put in that one quote. So that's really helpful when you come to draw out that data and put it into a report or a journal article or whatever you're writing up. So One of the other ways that we can explore the data is to look for the connections between the themes. So we've got a lot of themes that we've coded to here. And we've also adopted a style of coding where we have basically broken up one section of text into multiple categories. So for this example here, if you look on the bottom left of the screen, as we go over the highlights column, it's telling us the name of the quotes. We've got, so this section is about Scottish identity, the rest of the UK, it's negative, it's about David Cameron, and the visibility of the campaign. So this one sentence is talking about quite a lot of the different topics that we're interested in. So it's been coded as all of them. Now, Quirkos will allow you to see all the instances where you have this concurrent coding, where there's overlaps in the coding, and then explore to see what people are saying. So for example, let's choose the positive bubble here. If we right click on this, we can do it for any of the bubbles and choose the show overlap view. This will generate a view which is kind of like a dartboard or a kind of a target, where the bubbles which are in the center are the ones which overlap most with the bubble that we've chosen, in this case positive, so that's the one right in the middle. So that's the bullseye. And the further out we go, the less of a connection there is. So these ones on the very outside are marked 0 here. There's no circumstances when people said positive things about the wording of the referendum. Oh, there's one there, overlapping code. Are you 0? Yeah, so nobody said anything positive about social media, so that might be interesting. What we can see is people had a lot of positive things to say about the SNP, the Scottish Nationalist Party, at this stage. So if we click on that bubble, we'll then see all the instances on the right here where there was an overlap, where people said something positive about the SNP. So this first quote, I did think that the SNP came out a bit better. I did think as the time went on, the people in the SNP came across as being reasoned most of the time and quite capable. So that allows us again to kind of explore very specific things we want to look for in these overlaps. And when you hover the mouse over one of these bubbles, you'll also see a kind of breakdown of where they come from. So you'll see here, it says SNP overlapping codes 44. So there's 44 codes which are positive and about SNP. They're all now displayed on the right. And it also shows you where they came from. So you've got a list of all the sources. And then the first number is the number of overlapping codes which were found. And on the right, the number of total codes in that project. So in Ida's source, there were 13 relevant codes here about positive or SNP, out of 318 in total sections of text that we coded for her source in this project. So we can, as I said, we can do that for any of the bubbles here. I'm just clicking on the home button to go back on the screen. So what do people say about general politics, for example? Show overlap view. And as this loads, we can see that people were saying generally very negative things about general politics. More than anything else, negative overlaps with general politics. So again, that's an interesting thing to note. And if we click now on negative on the right, we'll see all the negative things which people say about general politics. So that's one way to explore the data. You can take screenshots if you want to show that with other people. Another way is to do the report. So I'll just generate one of these reports here. Now the report is a very kind of detailed overview of all of the data in your project, and especially gives you lots of ways to change the way that you display the quotes and things to make sure that you get those in a useful format for yourself. So basically what you get on the left side of the screen here is the preview of what the report will look like. Just make this a bit bigger. And on the right, you'll see the options of the sections that you want to have in there. And so what's useful is you get this kind of detailed breakdown, how long the sources are, how many quotes for each one of them. So you get a lot of detailed information and quantitative information as well about the codes and how they're laid out. You get graphs of the source property. So we can see we've got a perfect 50-50 gender split here in our sample, with a very slightly increased proportion of people saying no, which actually means we're kind of representative of how the population voted in the end. And here you've got the canvas views. So there's very many different ways that you can show those. We can remove the coding numbers, for example. We can put them in alphabetical order, or the time of when they were created. And then below that, you'll see we've got the text. So these are the actual quotes that went into the source. You can have this arranged either by source. So at the moment it's text by theme. We can turn that off and put in text by source. And now that will show us everything by each person in the project. Various different options here to show how much information you want to have. So you can say who did the coding. I don't need to show that, but I can also put in the source properties there. That means now, so for each of these quotes, we'll be able to see their gender, how they voted, and what their occupation was. So this person was a student. So that might be interesting to have as a kind of subtext to each of the quotes. When you're happy with the way that looks, you can save it as a PDF file, or you can save it as a web page, HTML file. And that's a file that you can send to someone else, even if they don't have Quirkos, and they can explore and play with data in the same way. There's obviously also a print button here. This project is going to create quite a big, quite a lot of rainforest deforestation, I think, if we print all that out. But we've got the option, obviously, to print that there as well. Now, one of the other things to note is that Quirkos deliberately doesn't give you a lot of ways to do quantitative analysis of qualitative data. It's not something that we think is a very good thing to do sometimes. You need to be careful about drawing statistical conclusions from qualitative data. But if you want the ability to do that, or you want to able to generate more quantitative views like graphs and things like that, then you do have the option here to do an export as CSV files. If you click on the project button and then choose export as CSV files, we can create a spreadsheet file, a kind of standard file that you can open in Excel or LibreOffice or Google Sheets or any software like that, and do a lot more quantitative analysis, and also you can do graphs and filters and a lot more information besides. So this basically generates a whole series of separate files. Now there's one each which describes each of the different parts of the database. So there's one here, table for source. So those are the sources in the file, a list of the name of sources if you need that. The metadata, so those are the source properties there. The questions, if you've got a structured project with questions and answers. And the level as well. So if you've used levels here. But the highlights file here is probably the most useful one. If we open that up, you can also bring this into SPSS or something like that as well. Where's that? Because it disappeared too. There we go. So here we've got a list of all of the quotes in the project, the source they came from, it's the source name there, the Quirk title they belong to, when that piece of coding was done, who did it, where it appears in the text, the color of the Quirk, question and answer, blah, 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 blah. So we've got lots of detail here. And one of the most useful things you can do in Excel is to apply the filter here. So if you put this on the top row here and then choose filter, now you've got a drop-down list. So it's very quick to just show the results from, for example, let's just look at what people said about the BBC. And there we've got everything about the BBC. And those are the quotes here. And here's the sources that they came from. And we can do that for all of the sources, see everything there, or we can just choose a couple of them. Maybe we just want to see 2015, like, reaction and bias, and we can do that right there. So from here, you can obviously create graphs. You can do a lot more statistical analysis if you want to do averages and means based on this coding. And if you're putting it into SPSS or SATA, you can do a lot more kind of segmented analysis as well. So that's a very useful way to get the information out. If that's looking a little complicated for you, There's another way to get the data out into Office, which is quite useful. Again, if you click on the project button and then choose export all sources as a Word document, now this will generate a standard Word file which you can send to anyone, and it doesn't have to just be used in Office. So I'll put this here. You've got two options here. You can create one big file, which is export all sources, or you can create separate ones. So this is the one for all sources here. And what you get is, if we bring on the, oops. Now, if we put on show markup here, there we go. Okay, so you can see that it's basically exported all of the sources of text that you brought into the project again. So they've come out again, but now they're coded. So now just using the comments here, you can see what sections of text were coded to what themes. So here's something about voting yes. I was willing to vote yes. And I said that was a key quote. That was an interesting thing that somebody said there. And this is very useful because you can print it out and you get all your colors that you've chosen in there preserved. And you've also got the option to, as I said, share that with someone else and they can see how you've coded that document. And it's nice at some stage in the project to go through, step back from the software, reread your data and see how it looks and kind of get a fresh reading of it with new eyes away from the computer. So that's the Word export. Now there's a couple of other things. One of the new features in the most recent version is the word cloud. So a word cloud basically is a way of doing kind of vocabulary analysis of the data, where each of the words that appears in all of the text in the project is represented as a word where the size is proportional to the number of times it occurs. So for example, here we can see that think is actually the word that appears most. So people are talking about their opinions a lot. I think they're saying I think. So we can see that that is one of the most common words that we have here. There's lots of fun options here to change how this looks. So we can scale it a little bit. We can take off some of the words, put a threshold in so we're only seeing the more common words and not all the little ones around the outside. And this can be interesting because, again, we can see that opinions are coming a lot here. Scotland as a word doesn't appear as often quite as we thought it might. People, so again, it's a very people-centered, people are talking about society and each other. Lots of fun options here to change the shape of it and things like that. And you've also got the option here to choose which sources you want to look at. So through this way, you can do a word cloud just of one of the sources. By default, you're looking at all of them together. But if you just want to see here, one of these for Ida, so this is just her words. So again, think, people, very honest, just. So that's obviously a little bit of a common thing for her. Scotland's more prominent in Jim than in Ida. We can look at Paula. Yes, she's saying yes quite a lot. So it's interesting to have a look around. Now, the other thing that we've got below here is the stop words. I'm just going to put all these back up again. Now, basically, when you do this kind of analysis, you would find that it is very dominated by words like the, a, I, to, it, and, of, that. So just the kind of grammatical kind of connection words that might not necessarily have any meaning to them. So Quirkos has a list of the 50 most common English stop words here. And by default, it removes those from the analysis. So it starts to show you more interesting things. But if you want to, you can add new things to them. So for example, if you think that think is appearing too often and you don't want to see that in the analysis, we can remove that. Q is coming up there quite a lot because we've got questions and answers. And now we've started to look differently. So you can keep adding words in here to see what's going on. And the other option you have here is actually a kind of more complete linguistic analysis. So you've got the statistics here for every word that appears in the project. on the number of times that appears. And you can copy and paste this again into Excel or something like that and do graphs and other information. So here we've got for the kind of the language in our project, how often each of these words appears. And again, if you're doing discourse analysis, you're doing very quantitative analysis of the language that people and words that people are using, this can be quite interesting. Especially if you're looking for words which people are using more often than others. So if you want to look for hesitation words, or if people are describing something in using more negative terminology, you can do some very specific kind of numerical analysis of that different language here. So that's the word clouds. And that's pretty much all I wanted to show for this stage. So all these different ways to explore the data, and all these different ways to export the data and share with other people. So it's a very brief overview. Do go and look on our website if you want any more information. You can download these data sets. You can also download a free trial of the software so you can use it yourself and explore your own data in your own way. So thanks for coming along today. And yeah, hope to see you at one of these sessions again soon.